Okay, hi everyone. This is a short tutorial intended to show how to do 3D modeling in Blender with the purpose of making a new gripper that we can 3D print and attach to our robot. If you want to use Grasshopper to do this, that's also, or Rhino to do this, that's also fine. But I thought I'd make this tutorial for anybody who wants to use Blender, and I'll try to record everything from a beginner's perspective, just in case you don't have any specific experience with Blender. So before we get started, I'm just going to show you the features of this gripper that I've made that's currently on the robots at the moment. And this tutorial will show you how to make this. So I suggest that you might follow this tutorial and just copy the steps to make my gripper. And then you can change it, and hopefully those skills can get you a good starting point to start to make a gripper that you can use that might change what the robot can do and maybe give you a way to connect it to helping you make things you want to make. Okay, so what I'm going to do first, I'm just going to look from the top view. I'm going to press this little Z here, and I'm going to show you the measurements that I have for the robot arm, and we can always double check these once we're in the lab. I'm going to grab this little annotation tool here and just kind of show you what we've got. My measurements for the robot arm are like this. If I measured this distance on the head of the robot arm, I got 8 centimeters, or we can check that. And my file is 0.79, so it's 1 millimeter difference, but that's probably just an artifact of my modeling process. But we'll double check this. And then importantly, the distance between these holes here to the center of the holes, I had a distance of 6.3 centimeters. We'll check that as well. 6.3 centimeters. So that's what we're going to aim towards. Now, other features, if I just change color here, I put it like an orange, I'll make a new annotation actually. So I'll make a new note, I'll make this one orange. Other features, these things here, these are just to save space, just so my model doesn't have to be solid and can print a bit quicker. So all these gaps here, these gaps are actually doing absolutely nothing for our model. They're just empty space. If I go back to my top view by pressing the Z here, and I'll go back to green, and this is where our tool is going in here. We've been putting our paintbrush in here, and then we've had screws going in here to hold our gripper in place. We'll just start with this one today, but what I hope is that you can improve upon it, and maybe after you've had a few tries, you might think of better ways to do it, or things that can hold different things. We don't have to use screws, we can use rubber bands, and we'll have a look online and see different approaches to fixing a tool in place. Okay, so I'll just hide these annotations. Just turn these off here. All right, so I'll go back into my regular selection mode, and okay, so let's start a new. Maybe I'll just save this, and I'm going to start a new file. So I'll just go File, New, General, and this is what you'll get when you open Blender. Okay, so I'll just delete this cube by pressing X and deleting it. Then I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a cylinder. So I'll go Mesh and add a cylinder. Now, before I click anything else, I have this little option here under Add Cylinder. The vertexes, if I change this, if I make this up and down, you'll see it's just changing the number of subdivisions around the cylinder. So because it's a polygon shape, to have a really smooth shape requires a lot of subdivisions. It's a bit different to using curves in Grasshopper. But okay, so what it was at the beginning, I think 32, that's fine. That's round enough for our purposes. So I'll just accept this and click off here. And now I want to change the size of this to match those original measurements that we had. So I'm just going to press the N key, N for Nelson, and I'm going to change the dimensions to match our size. So if we look from the top, I'll just press the Z, we want our Y and our X dimensions both to be 8 centimeters. So in Y, I'll type 0.08 meters, which is 8 centimeters, and in our X, I'll do the same, 0.08. So now if I zoom in with my scroll wheel, that's now 8 by 8 centimeters, but it's still 2 meters long, which is a little unnecessary. I think the gripper I made from memory is about 6 centimeters deep. So I'll just change this at the moment to 0.06, and I'll zoom in, and there's my cylinder. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some shapes that can cut the screw holes into this gripper. So this gets kind of interesting. So I'm going to press Shift A to add, and I'm going to add, well, actually we can do it a different way. I could have added another cylinder, of course, but this way let's use a duplication function. So here I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and I can just move my mouse and click, and we can see that we've got a second cylinder. So if we think about it, what we want this to be is this is going to make the hole that our bolts will go in that will fix this onto our gripper. So if I go here, let's say our bolt, at a guess, we'll check this when we're in class, but let's say the bolt is 1 centimeter in diameter. So I'll change the X and the Y to both 0.01 and hit enter. And I'll make the Z a bit longer. I can either make the number here like 0.1, or I can press S and Z and just make it longer. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put its location, all of these, to 0. And now it's in the middle of our cylinder. So the way we're going to use it, I'll show you, is if I go into this modifiers panel here, the little spanner, and I click Add Modifier, and I'm going to click Boolean, and it's automatically set to the function we want, which is difference. And I'll grab this little eyedropper here, and I'll click on this cylinder. And now if I hide my cylinder, which is this second one here that's now got the modifier on it, if I click the eyeball tool and hide it, nothing's happened. That's interesting. Yes, because I made a mistake. I've put the Boolean on the wrong cylinder. Very clever, Peter. Okay, so let me just delete that. I meant to put the Boolean on the main thing we're 3D printing, and this is what we're going to cut it with. My mistake. So I'll search, and I'll add Boolean, and I'll select the little bolt we made. Now I'll hide the bolt, and now we've got this hole cut here. And because it's longer than our first cylinder, it goes all the way through. So that's perfect. Now, just so I don't confuse myself again, I'm going to double click on this cylinder and call it bolt, B-O-L-T. And on the cylinder, I'm going to label it, left click, double click, and let's call it tool holder. Okay, so now I shouldn't get confused again. And this light and camera, I'm going to delete them because we're not going to use them here. So I'll just click on that and press the X button, and click on this and press the X button. Now, for good measure, I'm going to save my file. Save, and I'm in my class folder here. I already have my original file, so I'll make another one, and I'll just click this plus and call it number 2. But you can type whatever you want. Call it tools end gripper or whatever you like. And I'll hit save. Okay, so now we've saved our file. The X-Arm robot we're using has 2 bolts in it, and the distance between those bolts is 6.3 centimeters. So the easiest way to get that distance, if I look from the top, is if I do a hotspot search and I say 6.3 divided by 2 equals 3.15. Okay, so what we can do is if we move this one 3.15 this way, and then make another one and move it 3.15 that way, then our distance here will be that 6.3. So let's do that now. So let's move this one on the Y. It should be like 0.0315. Yep, okay. And I'm going to just duplicate that again. So I'll just hit Shift D, and then this time I'm just going to left click so that the duplicated object is actually right on top of the other one. And I can show you that if I press G for grab and I move it, you can see it's right on top. Then I'm going to right click and just put it back where it was. If you accidentally put it somewhere you don't want it to be, you can always just set these back to 0 and then just put that number back in here again, 0.0315, and that's the coordinate we wanted. Okay, so I'll look down from the top again. So with this second bolt, I'm going to just make this Y a negative number, which means we've moved it the exact same distance down in the other direction. Then all we need to do is add another Boolean modifier. So I can click Add Modifier and click, not Boolean, the first one that's popped up, and just select this other bolt. And now if we hide both the bolts, we've got something that will already fit on our robot, which is great. And the nice thing about doing it this way is that we can always change, if I press SZ, we can always change this thickness depending on how our design changes. So this is what's called a non-destructive workflow. We can turn these on and off, and we can sort of keep adjusting things as we work. So what I'm going to do with these bolts, I'm just going to put them in a new collection just so I know that these are not part of my model. They're just like tools that I'm helping to shape the other, the main structure. So with both of these selected, left click and then shift left click to select the other. I'll press M for move and I'll say new collection, and I'm going to call it cutters because they're things that cut. So here I can just untick them, and now we can just look at our tool holder again, and we can kind of ignore the cutters. Okay, so that's looking good. I'm going to add one more cutter and just cut out some of that middle section. So here I'm just going to duplicate this main. Actually, no, look, let's be even cleaner. I'll just grab one of these, duplicate it, Shift D, and I'll just set the Y to 0, and then I'll just look from the top and I'll press S for scale, and I'll just drag it up. I wouldn't want to take it too far because I still want to have enough plastic sort of in this area here so that the gripper is still kind of strong enough. So let's just put it somewhere there. We're basically just removing some of the unnecessary plastic. It's really long. It actually makes no difference. You know, I can still go to my tool holder. I'm going to add a new Boolean and select this giant cutter. And now if I hide my cutters, we've got now something that looks kind of like the first part of my model. Just so it's not annoying to look at, I'm going to make this smaller just so it's not distracting basically, but functionally it's doing the same thing. Okay, so now let's hide the cutters. So that's looking good. Now we're going to make the part that is going to be the part that holds our tool. And this is where it starts to become more of a kind of a creative challenge more than a technical one, is thinking like the easiest way to hold your tool. I mean, technically what we could do if we really wanted, if I go into my annotation, why can't I see my annotations here? Where have they gone? Oh, there they are. Okay. I mean, technically, we could just add two little bumps and like have a rubber band go around here or something. That would probably work. It might not be that stable. You know, you could have a rubber band go around the whole thing. But my suspicion is that, say, if your tool was going down like this, and you had rubber bands going around it, it might wobble around too much. So that's why we're going to add in something that's a little bit more kind of a little bit more sophisticated. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's take our original tool holder again. There's no need to create so many new cylinders. I'm just going to duplicate it one more time. Shift D, left click, and now I'll grab it on the X axis. So I press G, then X, and I'm just going to move it along this way a little bit. And I'm also going to remove all of these Boolean modifiers because we don't need to cut these things again. And then when I first made this, it was really just a bit of a guess, to be honest, of the size and shape I'd need. What I did is I made this section smaller and I joined this together and I made a hole to put our brush in. Maybe what I can do now, just as a guess, is I might make a brush just so I can have in mind where my paintbrush goes. And I've got some brushes here, and if I look at them, some of them get quite wide. Some of their widths get to up about 2 or maybe 1.8 centimeters as the handle. So maybe I'll just make one more object. I'm just going to press Shift D and duplicate that cylinder again, and I'm going to call this one brush because that's what I used for my first tool. And I'll make the X and Y like 2 centimeters. And I'll just put it where I think I want my brush to be held, which is like here. and I might just set the Y to 0 so I know it's in the middle. And then I'll scale it SZ, or we can also scale it on the Z by just dragging here. That will also scale it. So that's going to be our brush, and just so I know that's what it is, I might even just go into edit mode by pressing tab, go into face selection mode. Here we've got vertex, edge, and face. Click on face. I'm going to extrude down by pressing E and then moving my mouse, and then I'm going to scale that and left click. There, that's my brush. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there for a second. And now this, because I did a scale on this, we actually made it kind of the wrong height now. So I want these to be the same height again. So I'm just going to look at the height here. The height here on the Z-axis says 0.6. I'm just going to copy that by pressing Command C and going to hover over here, and I'm just going to paste that there. So now they're the same height, and we can tell they're in the exact same position by that flickering. And that's what Blender does when there's two faces occupying the same place. It doesn't know which one to show us, so it sort of flickers between the two. Okay, so that's looking all right. I'm also going to make, maybe I'll hide my brush for a second. So let's look at the top, and what I want to do is I want to join these two objects together, and I'm just going to sort of connect their, I'll probably join, like, if I go back to my annotation, I'm just going to like join them so that they kind of join like that. I think that's pretty simple. So I'll just delete that annotation. So what I'm going to do is delete half of each cylinder. I'll just go into edit mode. Edit mode we can go into by pressing tab, or we can select here, edit mode, object mode. I'm going to press tab. I'll press the number 1 to go into my vertex selection mode, and then I'm going to press the letter Z and go into wireframe. We can also just switch these views up here. So there's render preview, shaded, and wireframe. And I'm just going to select all of the vertexes before halfway, and I'm going to press X and delete vertexes. That's fine. And now we've got kind of half that shape. It's perfect. Press tab, and I'll press Z, go back to solid. And I'm going to do the same thing for this, and it's probably going to mess up my booleans. So I might just hide these for a second, and once we've finished the shape, these booleans, we'll turn them back on again. So let's just do the same thing for this shape. I'll press tab, go into wireframe mode, and I'll just drag select everything before the halfway mark, and I'll press X and delete vertexes. So now we've got these two shapes, and now we're just really just going to join them together. So I'll go out of edit mode to make sure I'm in object mode, and I'll press Shift, select both, and then I can either press Command J or Object, and if I look down here, there's Join, and we can see the keyboard shortcut there, Command J. So now after I click that, if we click one of them, we can see that it's all one object now, and here it just says tool holder. That extra object is gone. So now let's go back into edit mode, and we're just going to fill in the gaps. So I'm going to switch into edge mode by clicking here. Maybe I'll go back into solid mode by clicking Z and here, or just changing here. And I'm just going to grab this edge and shift select this edge, then click the letter F for face, which in this case means fill, and I'm just going to fill that gap, and here, F for fill. Okay, so now we've almost got our shape. And now I'm going to do a trick here. I'm going to click on one edge and press Shift Command, and it's just going to grab all the edges in between. I mean, I could just press Shift and grab them all, but that's really slow. So I'll press Shift and Command, grab all of those, and press F, and pressed Shift Command, and like that, press F. Okay, so that's going to be our basic shape. Now, one thing I did by mistake, when I joined it, I joined this shape onto this shape, and I lost all my booleans, which is kind of annoying, but they're really easy to put back on. So if I just add a bunch of booleans here, boolean, and I can actually press Shift D and duplicate these as well. We had 3, and then we'll just reattach them to our cutters. So I'll click this one, click this one, and click this one. Okay, now if I hide the cutters, we're back in business. Okay, so now let's look at our brush again. All right, so now I want to make a hole for the brush to go into. So what I did in the previous holder, I didn't make a round hole because I wanted to push the cutter sort of in. If I go back to drawing here, I wanted to push the holder into kind of a wedge here. And that's because, like, if the brushes are different sizes and it's all a curve, I think they'd move around a bit. So I had this kind of triangular hole. So I'm going to do that again because I think it kind of makes sense. I experimented with this design a few times. I had to print it twice to sort of get it to work. And so with yours as well, you know, we can design it and look at it and see if it makes sense. And then, you know, it might work perfectly the first time, or we might have to make it once or twice. Okay, so here's our brush. So now I'm going to make that triangular cutting shape. So I'm going to press Shift A and make a cube, which is huge at the moment. So if I zoom out, it's big. So I can scale it. I can also just press like scale 0.1, enter, and now it's nice and small. I'll look for my top view. I'm going to scale it a bit more, and then I'll G for grab X, and I'll move it along a bit. And let's just sort of make it a bit bigger than our brush, something like that. I don't want to have it too close to the edge here, so I might move this and my brush. So I'll shift select, I'll grab them both on the X axis and put them in a little bit more. Because remember, like, if you make these gaps too small, that's going to be a weak point in your design, and the tension of the screw or the movement of the brush could break your tool holder. So we want to use kind of the meaty part of the plastic to our advantage. So now with this cube, I'm going to scale it up on the Z axis. I'll just drag that up a bit because we're going to use this for cutting. Now, one cool trick we can do, if I press the backslash key on my keyboard, the same key that has the question mark, it will just select the object that we're clicked on. So, you know, if I do this and press that button, same thing. I'm just going to do it to my cube. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it into a triangle. So I'll go into edit mode by pressing tab, make sure I'm in edge select, and I'm going to grab these two edges and click M for merge and merge at zip. Okay, that's not what I wanted. Merge at center. Okay, I've done that the wrong way. I'll do it vertex by vertex. I'll do this vertex. So now I'm in vertex selection mode. We can toggle these by pressing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You'll just see these move. And you'll see that when we have 1 pressed, if I click 1 here and shift click, and now hit merge at center, that merges there, and I'll do the same thing at the bottom. Shift click, merge at center. So there's our triangle cutter. And just for 3D printing, these sharp angles might be a bit of a problem. So I'm just going to bevel this. So first of all, before I bevel, I'm going to click Control A and just apply my scale. So that's just set these numbers to 1. Then I'm just going to grab the edges here in edge select mode by pressing 2. 1, 2, 3. And I'm just going to grab my bevel tool, which is this one here, and I'll click and drag that a little bit. And maybe I'll add one more, just so it's kind of a smoother cut. Maybe even one more. That looks nice. Okay, that's fine. And I can, if I want to make the bevel wider, I can just press this number here and make it like 0.03. Whoops. No. Okay, so sorry, that made a second bevel. We don't want that. So we just want to click and drag it once like that. And then, no, sorry, it wasn't a second bevel. I just made the number 10 times too big. Okay. If you do something, if I do this again and it's beveled it again and it makes a mess like that, or if you ever think you've done an operation twice, just undo it until you know you haven't done anything and do it again. Because if you do, bevel something twice and you don't notice, sometimes there'll be like a whole lot of extra faces there that aren't meant to be there, and it will kind of create a problem. So I'm just going to undo my bevel and just click and drag it till it kind of looks nice. And I'll just add a few segments until it's curved. That looks good. Now I'll press that backslash button and look at it from the top. And now we can see that it's kind of too small for our brush now that it's a triangle. So I'll just press S and make it a bit bigger. And GX. This is why it's good. I'll go into wireframe mode. This is why it's good to have like something representing our brush, because we can easily, you know, screw things up and make the wrong shape. I can like scale it a bit bigger. I can also scale it like, I don't know, on the X-axis, like scale X, and then make it kind of chunkier rather than longer. That might make sense. Now GX, and to move it back. That feels pretty good, because 2 centimeters, that's bigger than most of my brushes. So I think this will be okay. But also remember that we can fine tune this when we're in the lab. You know, we might just double check our measurements and see that everything that we're measuring makes sense. I'm just going to GX and move this in so there's a bit more plastic here. And then we're pretty much done. So if I go back into solid mode, what I'm going to do is on my main object here, I'm going to add one more Boolean modifier, and I'll select this tool holder, this, whatever this is, what's that? That's called cube. I'm going to give that a name. I should call it like cutter brush, and I'm going to put that in the cutters folder. And now that that's hidden, we can see our object. The final thing I did on my previous design was, if I reveal my cutters, I just cut some more of this space out, only just really to save plastic more than anything else. So I'm going to duplicate this, Shift D, and maybe I'll move it to a slightly logical position here, scale it up a bit, something like that. And I'll just make these numbers a little bit cleaner, like 0.04, or maybe 0.035, like that. And then 0.02. And then I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll just make that other 0.02 negative, so it's on the other side. And then I will also just make Boolean cutters for those objects as well. I can just duplicate this one, duplicate. So I've got 2 new ones, and I'll just remove what was there before, and select this one, and select this one. So now if I hide my cutters thing, we're looking pretty good. So I've got the tool holder and the brush, and that might be ready to print. We might have to make changes when we're in the lab, but the main functions I've shown you is just how to use these numbers very precisely. The reason this works is that our object is in the middle, so we can use the position of other objects in a very precise way. The final thing I want to do is I want to duplicate this and have a second version that's my print output, just in case I want to come back and change anything. So with this collection here, I'm just going to collapse it and rename it working, something like that. And then I'm going to right click and make a new collection. Oop, that's gone inside my old collection. I'll just grab that and put it here, so it's down here. Close that one, and I'm going to call this 3D print. Okay, so now finally I'm going to duplicate this, Shift D, and then just left click so it hasn't moved at all. Looks like it has moved a little bit. I'll just put that. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Now I see it's moved because of the way I joined it to that other object. That's okay. Okay, so now I've got this tool holder number 2. I'm going to drag that into the 3D print folder. Now I'll hide the working one, and we've got this final model here, and I'm just going to apply all of the booleans. We can just click this arrow and hit apply, or we can hit Command A. Both do the same thing. So if I hover over this one and hit Command A, it applies it, and I'm just going to keep pressing that till all my booleans are applied. Now if I press Tab, you can see that all my cuts are made. Finally, I'm just going to apply my scale and my location, just so that we're sending out a clean 3D model to the 3D printer. So I'll press Command A and apply the scale. So now the scale just says 1. And I'll press Command A and apply the location, so the location says 0. Now all we need to do is File, Export, STL, and we just make a new folder in our project file for this course, and I'll call it, I don't know, STL. These are 3D print files. And the last thing I want to do is make sure I click Selection Only, just so we don't export everything else in the file, and click Export. And so now we've got a file that's ready to 3D print. We might need to check its scale when it goes into the 3D print software just to make sure that Blender's measurements have transferred correctly. But that should be enough information to get you started. There are some more precision modeling functions we can use in Blender. As well as just the numbers, we can look at snapping and a few other tools. But hopefully this is enough to get you started. And then in class, we're going to look at what else we can make a holder, what else we can make it do. Oh, actually, one thing I've just realized I've forgotten to do is I forgot to add the screw holes to put in here. So what we can do, we haven't lost anything actually. I can just delete this by pressing X, delete, go back to my working file, and I can get my cutters. I'm going to grab one of these, Shift left click to duplicate it, Shift D left click, then I'm going to put it in the middle by setting Y to 0. Now I'm going to rotate it on the Y axis 90 degrees. I can press RY 90, or we can just type 90 here, and then I'm going to press G and X, and we just want, if I hide my, I'm going to have to hide my other cutters for a second just so I can see what I'm doing. Also hide the brush, and we just want to make sure it pokes all the way through. So like this, GX, I'll move it in a little bit more. And then I found that in order to hold the brush firmly, I needed 2 of these. So I'm just going to move this one up, maybe GZ, no, not 1, because that's going to be 1 meter, GZ.01. No, I'll right click, how about GZ.02? No, that's too far. Okay, GZ.015, so 1.5 centimeters. And then I'll duplicate this, and then I'll just put a minus on the Z here. Okay, so now these are the other 2 bolt cutters, and you know what we're going to do. We're just going to add 2 more booleans, add them however you like. So there's one, and I'll Shift D, so there's another one down here, and I'll just use the eyedropper to select these. And now, if I hide my cutters collection again, there's our screw holes, so that looks good. And again, I'm just going to duplicate this, Shift D, left click, and move it into the 3D print folder, close our working folder, and then just Command A and apply all the booleans. And now apply the scale, Command A, scale, or we can also say object, apply, scale, and location. So all those numbers are now neutral. Location is 0, rotation is 0, scale is 1. And again, I'm going to export it as STL. And we've got tool end gripper 2, let's make it number 3. Selection only, that's good. Export. Now, before we print anything, we've got other things to check. We'll have to check that the width of our screws is right, or what exactly we're going to put in here for the screw to go into, all of these type of things. But at least this should give you all the skills you need to make your gripper. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.